Good afternoon, everyone. It is 3 o'clock now, so we are going to begin, although I believe some people may still be joining. My name is Veronica, and I'm the project manager of the online training initiative to address human trafficking. So I would first of all like to welcome you all to the second webinar in our live webinar series on human trafficking. Today with us is Caroline, who is one of the most amazing women I have personally ever met. As you know, Caroline is a brave survivor of human trafficking and a passionate advocate on behalf of trafficked persons. Caroline will be sharing her story, incorporating answers to many of your questions that have been submitted ahead of time, and providing valuable insights from her perspective as a survivor. It's important, I think, for you to know that we have received over 120 questions, which really just shows the tremendous interest in this topic and people's willingness to learn and how to best support trafficked individuals. And while we hope many of them will be answered, it may be possible, it may not be possible to address them all since we only have 1 hour. I would also like to just mention this in the very beginning, our thanks to the Ministry of the Attorney General and Ontario Victim Services for their generous support. And I would also like to thank my colleague Evgenia, who has been working tirelessly over the past few weeks to make this webinar happen. And most of you have likely already been in touch with her. So thank you, Evgenia. She is also here to address any technical questions you may have. So you can, if you're experiencing any issues, you can just type in the chat box or email her, and she'll be able to assist you. A few housekeeping items and a little bit of context before we actually begin. Just to let you all know, the webinar will be recorded, and we will upload the recording to our training website. All attendees will be muted during the webinar so as to avoid background noise, which could be distracting. Your names are hidden and only visible to MCIS host to protect everyone's privacy. If you, throughout Caroline's presentation, you have additional comments or questions, you can type them in the chat box throughout the webinar, and we will have 15 minutes at the end for questions and answers. And Caroline will try to answer as many of the additional questions as possible. And one last thing, and it's very important, sorry about that. The content, given Caroline's traumatic story, the content that she will be sharing may be disturbing. So this is just a warning to let you know and be prepared. If there's anybody accessing the webinar from home, for example, you may want to ensure that you don't have any children who can hear, and just be prepared that it may be disturbing. So as I was saying, the webinar is the second of a series of 4 webinars that are meant to offer participants in our online training on human trafficking an opportunity to ask questions from experts in this area. For those of you who may not be familiar with our training and our organization, MCIS Language Services is a nonprofit social enterprise founded in 1989. We have evolved in the past 25 years into a social enterprise providing interpretation, translation, and transcription projects in over 200 languages. And we are also committed to invest our net income into initiatives that support free services for victims of violence and the homeless, and training subsidies for aspiring interpreters and translators. And the online training initiative to address human trafficking is one of our social impact projects that we have been able to put together with the funding support from the Ministry of the Attorney General. And it is a free online training program which includes resources, tools, and tips to assist service providers working with survivors of human trafficking. It is available in both English and French, and it includes 9 comprehensive online modules and a full video resource with survivor testimonies. And you have on your screen the links to access the training if you haven't done so already. And now, without much further ado, I'd like to introduce Caroline. Caroline has traveled the world extensively. She's a skydiving instructor, holds a silver medal from the Canadian Nationals, and also held a Canadian record for a number of years. She has recently graduated from a Human Services Foundations program and is obtaining another degree in social service. She's a member of the London Anti-Trafficking Committee, a peer counselor with Connect Mental Health, a speaker at John's School, and a peer support worker at My Sister's Place. And in recognition of her incredible efforts in the fight against human trafficking, Caroline received the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal and also received several other honourable awards of distinction. Her work is inspired, as you know, from personal experience. She is a survivor who was trafficked for 8 years through strip bars along the well-known highway corridor. So Caroline, welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us today, and we're very much looking forward to hearing your story.
Hi everybody, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
My story starts a little differently from most. I was 35 when I was trafficked to the strip bars in Ontario. My name is Caroline, and I have answered to many names like Angie, Dusty, Savannah, Beth, although mostly I answered to bitch, slut, and whore. I'm a skydiving instructor, hold a silver medal from the Canadian Nationals. I'm a Canadian Level 1 certified coach and held a Canadian record for many years. I've also traveled the world fairly extensively. I was not young and naive by any means, but I lost my mother, my husband, and my 2 best friends within a period of 6 months. I now know that I was suffering from undiagnosed clinical depression and what is known as complicated grief. I was introduced by my other best friend's husband to a man I'll call John. I don't use his real name because it is still dangerous for me. He was associated and is associated with organized crime, although I did not learn of this until later, as initially he came with excellent references. In hindsight, I now know there were ulterior motives. It was winter and he would clear the snow off my car for me. I never ever got into a cold car either. He told me not to worry, he would help me get through it. He showered me with gifts and was completely there for me that within 6 months when he asked me to move in with him, I said yes. This behavior is what is commonly known as love bombarding, and you'll see it over and over and over, and it's also the lover boy scenario. Often you might see girls suddenly having their nails done or wearing brand name clothes for the first time. These traffickers and pimps are smart. They get the woman to fall in love with them and to believe they are loved back. Well, for me it worked. We started to build a life together, or so I thought. I was such a mess emotionally that I allowed him to control all the finances, as the less I had to think, the better. Things were great, or so I thought, until one day the sheriff turned up. We were being evicted. None of the bills had been paid. It was at this point that John suggested that it was now my turn to take care of the family, as he had already done so much for me. Now, at the age of 14, I was attacked and raped. At the age of 16, I was attacked and raped. And at the age of 18, I was attacked and raped. I had learned pretty early on that my body was for the taking, so I was not as shocked as I should have been when I was told I would be working in the strip bars. The appropriate attire was bought, and what are commonly known as hooker boots. I was not a drinker, but this is when I started. Imagine being on a stage naked, and the song in the background playing as It's Only Fun when the stripper's crying. Now, you don't get paid to work in a strip bar. You have to pay them for the privilege of working there. And depending on the bar, it can cost you between $20 and $100 just to get on the floor. You will also have to pay the driver who brought you there. So from the minute you walk in, you're already in the hole with debt. You have to work a minimum of 4 hours and 3 stage shows. The first song on stage, you are fully clothed. The second song, you have to take a top or a bottom off. And the third song, you are naked. But while you're up there, men are shouting derogatory things at you, like, my granny's got nicer boobs than you. And there's often a table/ledge that runs around the whole stage for men to sit up close. And at times they are masturbating under it while watching you. All the while you have to smile because the stage is considered advertising, and you hope that someone in the audience likes enough of you, of what they see of you, to take you into the back room and what I call sexually assault you. Now, in the back room, there are sofas, and you dance there per song. A song lasts on average 3 to 5 minutes, and you charge $20 per song, and that's before extras. This $20 allows the customers to touch and suck, insertions, oral and intercourse, or more. Once you have been there long enough, you learn to see who is controlling who and who's doing the controlling. He would surreptitiously sit on the floor and count the amount of songs I did, so I could not hide any money. I would come out from the back and hand the money straight over. I met girls in the bars from Slavic countries that when they were brought over to dance were forced by customs officials at the airport to prove in italics that they could dance, and those who refused were sent back. His son came to live with us, actually, at this point, and he arrived at 3 in the morning. His mother dumped him off with all his worldly possessions and said she didn't want him. I couldn't look this child in the face and tell him that I didn't want him either. You can guess fairly easily who was responsible for him. I was given no money and rarely food during this time. I would get on my bicycle, usually at night, when I could get away, and go dumpster diving, literally climbing in to look for unopened food, sanitary products, and clothing. My favorite were evictions. There was always plenty of stuff to root through. I also liked when the year ended for the university students because they always threw lots away of good stuff. But by now I'm in full survival mode, looking after this child and myself. All my identification, which had been held in safekeeping, was by now long gone, and so were any of my friends. You must remember, I still thought I was in love. John was my world and was the only reason I was alive. I remember one night when I lay on the floor to sleep because I always had to be within eyesight. I was woken and told I would never be allowed to sleep again until I took a blast on the crack pipe that was in front of me. This was the beginning of my true descent into madness. I had no idea just how bad things were going to get. In a weird way, though, having the child there gave me a tad more freedom. John would disappear for hours at a time, knowing that I would not run, as I would not have left his son alone in that environment. People have often said, why didn't I just leave? I was not held with iron chains, but I was chained psychologically. I later discovered that while he was gone on those periods, he was running other prostituted women. At one point, when I threatened to leave, he broke all my toes, and this is when he began bringing men home. I would get his son off to school, work, and stop for lunch, then work again. I tried to hide money, but somehow he always found it, and then I would pay big time. Things were very desperate for me by now. Years had passed. One day the sheriff turned up and we were being evicted again. We got a motel room after I got his son back to his mother, who by now had gotten her act together, but I lost all my furniture. I had some clothes and my mother's ashes. I know, looking back, that they were people, especially customers, and please know that when I call them customers, I'm being incredibly diplomatic. I know that when they looked at me, they saw nothing but a dirty crack whore. There were times when I thought someone might be sympathetic to my situation and I reached out. I was told several times that the definition of sympathy lies between shit and syphilis in the dictionary. I was hopeless and truly believed I was caught. There were bars that I worked in at Christmas time when the hockey playoffs would be on, and the police would come and sit at the bar in uniform to watch the playoffs while we were being trafficked behind them. We didn't think there was any help for us. I started to burn myself with cigarettes, adding to the burns customers had given to me on my breasts. This is when he started bringing women back to the motel room and forcing us to have sex with each other. The pain I was in was indescribable, and I saw no way out. Now, in London, there are some very seedy motels, and I can't tell you how many times I was chased back to my room. I would wake up in the morning with feet marks on my door. I would sit and shake with fear to the point that when he came in, I would be glad to see him. Better the devil you know, right? One day he flew into another rage, and this is when I lost my mother's ashes. To this day, I don't know where she is. This was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. I phoned the Clarkside Women's Shelter here in London, and they got me into a taxi and up to them. But once there, they told me they had no room for me. Guess who I had to go back to? A few days later, I called again, and they had room. I arrived with very little, leaving most of my clothing behind. But John found me there the same day and proceeded to throw what I had left behind at the building while the staff inside talked to him through a microphone, telling him to leave. Once he left, they told me that I could no longer stay there as my presence endangered all the other women. They moved me to the Wellington Road shelter. But 2 days into that stay, I fell ill with what was to become a long battle with colitis. I was admitted to hospital. Now, if you're away from the shelter for more than 2 nights, you're evicted, and that's what happened to me. When I was discharged, I had nothing but the clothes on my back and 2 quarters. There was only one person in the world who I knew who would come and get me, so I called him again. I've seen women over and over go back to these men because of stuff like this. The shelters are great places, but for a woman who, for whatever reason, was involved in the sex trade, they may not be the best place. For a start, some of the other women in there have biases. and perhaps the abuser they are hiding from may have had issues themselves using prostituted women. A woman may be re-victimized in this environment. But now, once he came and got me from the hospital, he decided that I needed to be living out of a car. Not in a house, not in an apartment anymore, or even a motel room I wasn't allowed to. Never in my life had I envisaged myself in such a bad situation. Where do you wash? Go to the bathroom. Back to work I went. The cycle started all over again until I found out about the Salvation Army Center of Hope. I was able to sleep there a few nights until he found me again. Now, these guys aren't looking for us because they love us. They're looking for us because we're dollar bills, which I'm sure I'm singing to the choir, but that's how it is. Luckily, that day, Alert Security picked up on the situation and alerted another worker on the women's floor. They phoned the shelter who allowed me to come back again. Now, usually a person only gets 42 days in the shelter. It's impossible to get your life back together in that amount of time, especially when you're so exhausted. When you walk in, all you want to do is sleep for a month. How can you start looking for housing when you don't even know the city you're in? I was very, very lucky and was allowed to stay for 4 months. I applied to get on the London housing list. Now, to get on the priority list for London housing, you need a letter from your landlord stating that you were living with your abuser. How do you get that letter if your landlord is your abuser? I've seen women that were on life support go back to their abusers and traffickers because they could not get that letter. I decided to go to one of the motels we had stayed at to ask. I decided to go to some of the motels we had stayed at to ask for the letter. All but one said no, and they blackmailed me into giving them money for it, or they would tell my trafficker what I was up to. Often the traffickers in the motels are working, they're close simpatico with each other. Needless to say, I found the money and got my letter. The day I was given the keys to my apartment, I wept so hard that the woman in the office had to hold me. Unfortunately, my apartment was on the 2nd floor and you could jump up onto the balcony. One day I went on my balcony and found a bag I'd never seen before. Inside were rubber gloves, duct tape, and a gun. I took this to be a warning. I called the police, who I did not tell my situation to, because I've met men that have tattoos on their arms of a circle with a rat inside the circle and a line through it, and it says rats are a dying breed. So I didn't tell the police about my situation, and what they told me was that the bag was either a home invasion kit or a rape kit, and that actually they find people with them all the time. They weren't fazed by it at all. I have since moved, and I'm on the 8th floor of a building. You'd have to be Spider-Man to get to me now. I went to Weeble, which is a high school for those returning, got my grade 12. Then went to Fanshawe College and graduated from the Human Services Foundations course. I'm currently in my 2nd program there, a 2nd year SSW. I am on the London Anti-Human Trafficking Committee Executive. I speak at the John School, which is a court-mandated diversion program for men who are arrested communicating for the purpose or picking up a prostituted person. I try to humanize the woman to the men by asking things like, would you drop your mother, daughter, and or niece off in a dark alley at 3 in the morning with nary another thought? And to a man, they always say no. So I ask them, well, why'd you do it to her? And I get a lot of like ohs and oohs and ahs. I try to think of the woman as other than just orifices. They are people with hopes and dreams just like them. And when I hear the argument while I'm helping her feed her children, I say, if you really care, then just give her the money. Don't make her earn it. I point out that although I may have been the one that initially propositioned him, and I laughed at all his jokes, and I told him he was one of my favorite customers, I secretly hated his guts and wished him harm. They need to realize it's all an illusion for them, and that they are only fooling themselves. We don't like them at all, and there is no such thing as a good customer. I have at times been back to some of the bars and have managed to get one girl out. The last girl I was hoping to help hung herself before I could. I have since received a Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal for my work in this area, and in 2012 received Volunteer of the Year from Salvation Army Corrections and Justice. In my role in the London Anti-Human Trafficking Committee, I do regular speaks and have spoken to law enforcement. We have a special youth committee and often go into the high schools teaching kids red flags so that hopefully they do not fall prey. I am desperately trying to get to talk to emergency room doctors as they are on the front line also. The hope is that they can recognize the signs and be able to separate the victim from the trafficker when they're in the emergency and be able to talk to them. I never ever recommend asking a person if they're being trafficked, because a good portion do not self-identify as such, and I certainly didn't, and it took a couple of years until the light bulb went off for me. I think a better approach is to ask them if someone is hurting them. I often think back that if someone had asked me that question, I might have reached out for help sooner. Even in the shelter, no one recognized what had happened to me. There were so many missed opportunities for me, like when I was in the hospital. He was always by my side in my room, and I had come directly from a women's shelter, so there was a red flag. It is hard to get someone to see that the person they love and thinks loves them back is actually trafficking them. It takes time and patience on the part of the service provider. Once someone identifies, then there's a whole host of other issues that need to be dealt with, like addictions, PTSD, and often dissociative disorders. Training comes into play here. It's essential that we have service providers trained in trauma, as all victims have been exposed to it. Once again, I need to reiterate that I was lucky. I lived in a city where there were shelters. Not all have them. Money, time, and energy needs to be put into building some form of accommodation for trafficking victims. If this means apartments scattered across the city or a central building, this needs desperately to be addressed. Some think the apartments are a better idea because the traffickers sometimes send women into the shelters to get the woman back and to recruit, especially because these women have already been groomed and broken in. They are especially vulnerable. I have been asked what's my take on how the media covers human trafficking, and I have to say I get sad and angry. CNN still continually confuses human trafficking and human smuggling. There is, at least in Canada, very little shown in the media on trafficking, and seeing it as such a big issue, I think it is being ignored and swept under the rug. I really do believe that we need to make more noise. I am a peer support worker with victims while finishing my schooling, and I think I'm being underutilized. This is starting to change, though, as people are beginning to understand the value of the role I and others can play in this area. When I speak in high schools, I tell the kids, if someone really loves you, they would never ask you to do something that could or does harm you. That is not love. If you find yourself in this situation, trust your gut and run. I know now, looking back, that the things that were most helpful for me were having a roof over my head, that I wasn't constantly in danger of losing, and not being moved all the time. Staying in the shelter did help me find my feet, but that, I think, is only because I was able to stay there for so long. And meeting with a woman named Aura Burdett, who is an outreach counselor at Corrections and Justice at the Salvation Army. She works with women who are at risk. She enabled me to find my voice and let me take my time in disclosing, and valued my opinions. You must remember that when I ran, I had the clothes on my back and an addiction. It had been almost 8 years since I'd held a pen. I actually had to learn how to sign my signature again, and I had to remember what my real name was when people asked me. I would tell them Savannah or Angie and forget that my name was Caroline. I have been given encouragement and support going back to school, and doing this helped boost my self-esteem. I hope by telling my story that I've helped you in some way. I thank you for your time, and if there's anything I can do to help anybody, please let me know. Veronica knows how to contact me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Caroline has incorporated, as you have probably noticed, those of you who recognize your questions, a lot of the questions that have been submitted ahead of time. We still have quite a bit of time available, and Caroline has graciously agreed to answer any question. So please feel free to type your questions in the Q&A in the chat box, and we will pass them on to Caroline. You can start typing in your questions now or at any point throughout the rest of this presentation. As we wait for the questions to come in, I have one question for you, Caroline, and that is, you know, we've known each other for about 3 years now, and you've been a great support for us developing our training. And we've always found that the voice of the survivors is, you know, you cannot really develop anything like this without participation from survivors in the process. And back then, you know, there was very little. That was very few projects involving survivors in projects around supporting trafficked persons. Do you find that things have changed? Is there an improvement? Do you find that you're being involved more?
Things are definitely improving. I regularly speak with another trafficked person who has gotten out and is successful. In fact, she's going to be one of the people speaking. And her and I talk about this. A lot of service providers, this has been our experience, are wary of using us because they're afraid that we could be triggered. They're afraid of transference. But people like Lisa and I have done the hard work necessary to recover. We can be trusted to be used. This is where I say we are underutilized, although it is starting to improve. We don't offer our services because we don't know that we're capable. We are very able to help. Does that help?
Yes, that's great. Thank you. We have another question. One participant saying, Caroline, thank you for your story. And the question is, what elements do you think are important to develop a safe house for victims of human trafficking?
Okay, I think that's a great question. Okay, when I went into the shelter, personally, I would have liked to have been around some other people. If I had been alone in an apartment, I think I would have been terrified. But there is the issue of traffickers managing to get other women into the shelters under the guise of being trafficked for the sole purpose of retrieving women that have run or recruiting. So a lot of people a lot of what I hear is getting apartments that are scattered across the city and perhaps getting 2 women or 2 people per apartment. But the thing is, it's not that easy because somebody has to sign the lease for these apartments. Somebody has to be responsible for them. They have to be furnished. And how long do you let them have the apartment for, and how long does an apartment sit empty, and who pays for it? So there's a lot of factors involved in this. I think perhaps for me, I think an apartment would have been nice as long as I wasn't alone. And I think also that some of these women have children, so maybe a space that will enable them to bring their children is imperative.
Thank you, Caroline. So moving along, another question is, do you think having safe homes away from the city would be helpful, like room and board with a support family?
Not really, simply because she still has to somehow get her life back together. And unless she has transportation, she can't do that outside the city. So, see, transportation is another big issue for the woman. Taking public transport can be risky depending on who the trafficker is. And if she's outside the city, she has to come back and forth, and then finding her a place to stay, because she has to have a forever home. And finding that outside the city, once again, transportation is an issue, especially if she has children that need to go to school.
Thank you, Caroline. So building on that, that comment about women who have children, in your experience, does that happen a lot? Does it happen a lot that women who are in a trafficking situation have children with them? And what happens to those children?
I saw a woman that had children being trafficked, and the children were at risk, definitely. And I know that some of these guys, I can't speak for every girl that I know that had the kids, but I know a few of them. The men were threatening harm to the children. Because I escaped, I don't know the end result for some of these women. Like I said, I tried to go back to the bars. It wasn't safe for me to do that. And some of the girls had disappeared. So I don't know. I just don't know what happened to them.
Thank you, Caroline. That's one of the saddest parts, and we hear it a lot, that, you know, it's not just the women themselves in this case, but their children who are suffering from this, and children being used as control mechanisms by these traffickers. Because in your presentation you had mentioned that your indignation against the media that still cannot tell the difference between human trafficking and smuggling, one of the participants would like you to define this difference.
Okay, well, human smuggling is an agreed upon transaction. Somebody pays another person to transport them, and it is almost always across a border. Human trafficking, if they're transported, it's against their will without them being aware of what they're being transported for. And once a person is human smuggled, which is a consensual transaction, and they arrive wherever they're being humanly smuggled to, they are then at risk to be trafficked, but until that happens, they are not trafficked. There is a big difference between the two. And not all people who are human smuggled become trafficked.
Thank you, Caroline. And just to add to that, for those of the participants today who would like to learn a bit more about this difference and some other important distinctions, all of this is covered in our online training, which is free and you can take it at any time. So I do encourage you to consult it. And for people who prefer a more offline experience, we have a handbook that covers the same topics you can download and read in your own time. We have more questions coming in, so thank you everybody for sending them along. Before I go into the next question, I would just like to share a comment from one of the participants. She's saying, "I'm so sorry you had to go through this. I have been telling people about the existence of this for about 20 years, but I did not know what to do. If I can ever help, please let me know. I would like to be more involved." So this was not a question, but since I think it echoes the feelings of many of the participants today, definitely many of the people who have taken our training, they would like to get involved. So could you just tell us about some of the ways people can do that?
When I speak, at the end, I always say to people, now that you know, any form of forgetting about it is complicit, is being complicit. And if the only thing that you ever do is tell one more person about it, then you've done something. Because people they may not have time to volunteer, they may not, if they just talk about it, make people aware, because education is huge. It's huge, 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 huge. It can prevent, and even if I had been educated, I would have recognized what was happening to me. But because I didn't know it existed, I didn't know what was happening to me. And, well, I just keep saying education, education, education.
Thank you. And I guess the question, that's a follow-up question on that, is what supports are needed to help ensure women stay out of human trafficking situations? And Caroline, just before I let you answer that, I do want to stress, and this is something that's been very important in developing our training and our follow-up activities around that, is to stress that while, yes, this is a problem that affects primarily women, men have also known to be trafficked, including in the sex trade and in other contexts as well. But of course, the highest risk is among women. So thank you to the participant who brought up this question. And Caroline, if you have any ideas on the supports that would prevent women from getting into trafficking situations.
I think it would be really neat to see something in the schools, some sort of teaching about healthy boundaries. It's been many years since I was in high school, so maybe they are doing that, but it's not getting through for some people. Healthy boundaries, explaining what love looks like and what it doesn't look like, not just sex education, because that's not what this is about. This is about having respect for your body and being able to self-advocate to get that respect from other people. Because you can be vulnerable but still able to self-advocate for yourself if you recognize that somebody isn't treating you with respect. So I think healthy boundaries and being able to advocate for yourself, if that can be taught in the schools, that's a huge, huge, huge thing that can prevent someone from being trafficked.
Excellent, thank you. And another question, a follow-up question from the same person is, how, I'm sorry, how do we ensure that survivors of human trafficking do not return to the lifestyle? And, you know, it's well known among frontline providers that, you know, it's usually the first attempt to exit is not the successful one, and it's definitely been the case for you, that you've had to go back a couple of times before you were out for good. So
yeah,
what would help people?
That's a tough one. I know that for me, it was going back to school and being able to feel a sense of accomplishment and that I was more than just a body. I was more than just an object. And going to school and getting my grade 12 gave me that, because I knew that I had a brain and that I could write something that somebody would read and think, wow, that's neat. And having people around me that valued my opinion, that actually asked for it in the first place, because I was never allowed to give an opinion, and if I did say something, it would be all hell to pay. And I was told I was stupid for so many years, and having people around me that made me feel that I wasn't stupid and that I could be a contributing member to society. And a big deal of that for me was going back to school. Or if I had already got my grade 12, maybe being able to get a job, even if it was only part-time or 1 day a week, to becoming a functioning member of society. Because when you're being trafficked, you're in a subculture. And when you're walking around, it's like you're in a bubble and everyone else is living in a different universe to you. Being integrated back into the universe as everybody else was huge, 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 huge.
Thank you. Another question that just came in is a personal question to you, Caroline.
Yeah.
Can you travel to a small town high school to tell your story? I think a lot of small town kids are at risk. So before I let you answer that, I want to maybe expand the question a little bit. I'm glad it has come up, and maybe you want to elaborate on the ways in which you are involved and for the types of activities for which people can contact you and you can provide assistance.
Okay, I will go. Okay, first I have to preface by saying I personally do not have a car. I survive on food banks. I don't have clothes that fit. I'm still struggling to recover from my experience. But I will go anywhere and talk to anybody, anytime, other than when I'm in school. I will do whatever I can to help change this travesty. We, as an organization, London Anti-Human Trafficking, have people who have cars, and we will go out and speak to people. But usually if it's a great distance, we need mileage, just because we're a not-for-profit organization. But if somebody can supply transportation, that's great. I will do anything.
Thank you very much, Caroline. To the participant who asked this question and anybody else who would like to get in touch with Caroline, please, I will provide my contact information at the end of this webinar. Feel free to reach out to me. I will then pass on your message to Caroline, confirm with her, and then put you in touch. Okay, let's see. We have a few more questions. To your knowledge, Caroline, are there more shelters available specifically for victims of human trafficking?
The shelters are very guarded in as to where they are, as they should be. So I know that there's maybe one in, this is what I know of personally, one in Toronto and one in BC. Now, there may be more that I'm unaware of, but I don't know anything more than the fact that they're in Toronto and BC. Yeah, I can't answer that question better than that.
I can just add a little bit of information. As some of you may know, for a number of years, there has been an organization in Ontario specifically dedicated to assisting trafficked persons, and it wasn't a long time or even transitional housing. It was immediate, so a safe house for the stages immediately after exiting the situation. Walk With Me Victim Services, unfortunately due to funding issues, that no longer exists. We know that a new State House project is, just being kicked off in Toronto, but unfortunately, Ontario has been lagging behind other provinces in this respect, and oftentimes it's domestic violence shelters that are used to also house survivors of human trafficking.
I should have prefaced by saying that I know of 2 different organizations here in London that are attempting to get some safe places put together. I'm not allowed to say more than that, but there are people trying to do things about this.
Okay, thank you, Caroline. Another question is, whatever happened to John?
Well, I have since seen him that I'm aware of. I've seen him once, and it was downtown outside the Central Library, and I was left with a massive dinner plate-sized bruise underneath of my arm, and I bolted. When I walk with 360-degree head, sort of like out of the exorcist, my head, not literally, but I'm spinning, checking everywhere I'm going. I don't know what's happened to him. I still see his son all the time because I did help raise him. When I got that kid, he couldn't barely read or write. He was 7. He couldn't tie his shoes. He couldn't really use a knife or fork. He's now on the honor roll at a high school. So I still have contact with him, but he and I do not discuss his father. And I'm sure that one day his son will come to me and ask me questions, which I will answer as best I can, but I don't know what's happened to him. The problem is with these, I'm going to say that it was Hell's Angels, and a lot of these guys are really smart now, and they don't dress with the raggedy hair and the patch on the back of their leather jacket. They'll wear a suit and tie. You don't know that they're a Hell's Angel. You could be having a conversation with them and not know. So he may have changed his appearance by now. I don't know. I did not go to the police, and I probably won't, because of, well, there's just so many of them, put it that way. There's just so many of them out there. I have one living in my building, even though he's unaware of who I am. I know who he is. I have one even living in my building.
Thank you, Caroline. Another question, and many people are prefacing these with comments and encouragement. So first, thank you for your courage in providing us with this information. The question is, if we notice something strange, how do we obtain more information from people who can identify this, and how do we report it?
If we notice something strange, as in like a woman or a girl, acting differently, or I'm not sure exactly if you notice something strange in the house next door, or if for example, if you notice something strange going on in the apartment next door, I would get a hold of the police. You can phone Crime Stoppers. There is a national hotline, and I'm sorry, I don't have the phone number on me. I should hang my head on this one. But you can Google National Human Trafficking Hotline for Canada. Sorry, I'm just going to look on my phone and see it. I don't think I'm going to look for a phone number here. Where, I suppose you can't find out where this person now is, where they are, who wrote that question?
Yes, I can definitely put you in touch with that person later on.
Okay, because I'll get some phone numbers.
We can also, if you provide it to us, Caroline, we will share it with all the participants.
Okay, let me just.
Okay. It's okay. It's okay. We can definitely share that as a follow-up to the webinar. We will email everybody the information.
Okay. Okay. Excellent.
Okay. So let's move along. We are getting tons of questions, so I just wanted to thank everybody for being so engaged. The next question is, have you ever encountered a lot of immigrant women in human trafficking situations here in Canada or Ontario?
Actually, I saw and I worked with a lot of Romanian girls when they were able to come across on the exotic dance visa. They were being trafficked through that. And they had such limited English that the only thing they could say in English was, "You want dance, I give you dance." and $20, and money, they could say money denominations. And like I said, a lot of these women, when they came through customs, the officials forced them to prove that they could dance in back rooms before letting them in. So yes, what happened was they canceled the exotic dancer visa. And I think you may all remember this a few years ago, all the strip bars were like losing it because they said they were going to lose women. Meanwhile, there's so many women wanting that dance. And so what they started to do was trafficking the woman from Quebec because they couldn't get the woman from overseas. So the bars were flooded with French-speaking girls that had limited English.
I'm very glad you brought that up, Caroline, and this is just to let everybody know, if you don't know already, that we are very lucky here in Ontario that the government actually provides free interpretation services for victims of domestic violence, sexual violence, and human trafficking. So for all those among the participants who are frontline workers, whoever, if you're ever in a situation where you need to communicate with a client who does not speak English or has very limited English, you can contact the local agency in your area that provides these services on behalf of the government. They are all funded free of charge, and I do encourage you to use professional interpreters. What happens is sometimes people will use whoever comes in with the client as an interpreter, but mind you, in these situations, they could be the trafficker. So I can provide all the information on how to access those services. If anybody needs that, just please do let me know. Okay, let's move on to a next question, and this is, I guess, following up on the previous question about what to do if you suspect something. Under what circumstances do you recommend going to the police, and what may be some circumstances where you advise against it?
That's a tough one because not a one of the girls that I knew wanted to be involved with the police, not a one. And really, you have to meet the victim where they're at, because you could call the police and she'll just say, no, he's not doing anything to me because she's in love with him or she's scared of him. That's a really tough one. I guess if you can literally see someone is in imminent physical danger, then obviously you need to call the police. But other than that, you really have to, it's up to the woman to let you know when they're ready for that.
Thank you, Caroline. So switching back a bit to a different topic, how can educators and counselors best respond to these clients without re-victimizing them?
I think language is important. You know, I've heard frontline service providers say, oh, she was whoring. Well, no, she wasn't. She was selling her body. Language is really important, and I think definitely, once again, meeting her where she's at, because she may not see him as a trafficker. It's her boyfriend, and if you're speaking ill of her boyfriend, she could take offense, and already you've shut the door. I have to say, meeting her where she's at, that's the ultimate, most important thing.
Thank you, Caroline. Okay, and I guess we're getting a little bit into the politics of it with this next question. What are your thoughts on Bill C-36, and how might it have helped you? In your opinion, how can we get our police to implement these laws?
Okay, well, I have to preface by saying, obviously, I'm a little biased. I like Bill C-36. I think it's time that men are held accountable for their behavior. You know, so many times in the strip bars, I saw the police come and grab the girls and handcuff them and march them through the strip bar butt naked outside into the police van, naked. And the men would be told to go home. If often a man would lie back on his back on the stage and put a $5 bill folded lengthwise on his mouth and expect her to sit with her vagina on his face and pick the $5 bill up with her vagina. Now if a police officer saw that, because it was considered contact would be charged, but not him. And often what these guys would do is they grab the $5 bill away fast, quickly and lick her. And she would be charged. If she was sitting on the floor and a customer came up to her and put his hand on her, she would be charged because it was contact. So I think it's time that men are held accountable for their behavior. And I'm a great advocate for getting rid of the demand side, because if there is no demand, then there's no need for supply. That's how I feel about Bill C-36. I also know a lot of women that have incurred criminal charges. And how do you get out and get a job when you have a criminal record? You can't even volunteer if you have a criminal record. So many of these women will just be re-victimized that once they try and get out and feel they have to go back into prostitution again because they can't get work anywhere else. And if they legalize prostitution, and I know from somebody who's just come back from Germany a month ago, because prostitution is legal there, and you go down to the local POGI or welfare office and you say, I can't get a job, I need money, they can say to you, I will not give you money because the local massage parlor down the road is still hiring. You can be forced into prostitution. And in theory, that's what could happen here too. So once again, I'm really biased on this issue, but some of these are facts something, and you can't argue with them.
Thank you, Caroline. And just the last part of that question was a comment for you that I'd like to share, saying thank you for sharing your story. You're an inspiration. And I think many of us on this webinar share that opinion. We have a few minutes left, so if it's okay with you, we'd like to do a couple of more questions.
Yep.
So this question comes, and I'm guessing from somebody who has some experience working in shelters, saying when women come into a shelter, they can be aggressive or hostile. It can be difficult to provide services or get information. Any suggestions to help the workers provide these services to these clients?
I see. Yeah, you're in a tough spot. Like I said, for me, if somebody had come to me and said, is somebody hurting you? I would have said yes. And then the next question that would have helped me would be, how are they hurting you? What are they making you do things? Because I'm trying to put this into good words, because being in a shelter as a worker, you're in a really tough situation. Disclosing may not be the thing the person wants to do if they recognize what's happened to them. I'll give you an example. Okay, I was in the shelter one night, and one of the workers came up to me and said to me, oh, so I hear you used to work in the strip bars. And I went, yes. And they said, oh, well, tell me all about it. So I told them, as much as I felt comfortable telling them how $20 allows a customer to suck and touch, and the insertions and things like that cost more. And she went, oh, so thank you for telling me, and walked off. There was a golden opportunity for her to have delved deeper with me. So if you know the woman's been in the sex trade, you could start asking questions like, so how does it work? How do you operate? Do you know that the most busiest time for a sex worker who's working the streets is before work at like 5 and 6 and 7 a.m. before you guys go to work? Getting information like that, other than opening a conversation, building trust, and then delving deeper because that opportunity was completely missed with me. I don't know if that helps, because I know you're in a very tough situation. I know when I walked in, I was angry too, so I get that.
Thank you, Caroline. So I guess we have another question that is, again, on the topic of shelters. And this participant says, I run a homeless shelter. We currently only have frontline services, but we are looking to develop a resource to help women who are going through violence, sexual violence, trafficking. What is an ideal resource to create to meet the needs in a useful way?
Oh, one of the things that really plays in perfectly is the power and control wheel, because that's what these guys are doing. If you go, you can Google Pimpology 101. I don't know if any of you have heard of this. It's called Pimpology 101, and you Google it, and it's a site there that teaches men how to traffic, abuse, and control women. And if you go to the power and control wheel, it's all there. So I think addressing that and teaching them how to recognize those signs is a really good resource.
Thank you, Caroline. And I will, this is going to be the last question, and
okay.
we're 5 minutes to 4 o'clock. And we had a question from a participant from the U.S. asking whether you know of any resources in the United States that would be useful.
I would have to, yes, but I don't have them off the top of my head. I can supply that information.
Okay, so if the participant who asked that question could just shoot us an email, and we are happy to provide. And just the one thing that comes to off the top of my head is in the United States, there's this one organization that is extremely active in the fight against human trafficking. It's called the Polaris Project. You can Google them, and that's an extremely good resource to start, and you're very likely to find additional resources from there. Okay, so thank you so much, Caroline. I'm getting more and more comments from people saying that you are amazing, you are an inspiration. So thank you so much. You are a beautiful inspiration is what just came in. I hope someday you can. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I definitely share all these feelings, and it's been wonderful knowing you and working with you over the past few years. So I think there's a couple of questions, not too many, that have been left unanswered, unfortunately, because we did not get to them. We did cover a lot. So anybody who would like to sort of ask any follow-up questions, please feel free to contact us. I am going to put up our contact information, my contact information, and again, yes, on the screen. If you ever need to, you know, any questions around human trafficking, if you are looking for ways to help, anything at all in relation to this topic, please feel free to contact us at any time. And just before we wrap up, I do hope that everybody has found this webinar useful. It seems to be that way based on the comments we've been receiving. And I just wanted to remind you that we have 2 other webinars scheduled in the coming months. The next one with Jolene Haida, who is a counselor and has been working, supporting trafficked people for the past few years. Actually, is coming up in January, and then in March we have Lisa. Lisa, who is again a brave survivor of human trafficking, will be sharing her story. So you could look out for those emails announcing the webinars in the coming months. As you exit the webinar, you will see a very short questionnaire, and we'd really appreciate it if you could provide your feedback. And yeah, that's it. I'm going to end with the last comments that have just came in, and I promise this is the last one that I will read out. We have a comment that says, Caroline, you're a beautiful person. Thank you, Caroline, for your testimony and showing us your resiliency.
Thank you, everybody.
So thank you, everybody, and have a great day. Bye.
Bye-bye.